Now let's get some more reaction to last night's special Sky News leadership programme. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss clashed over the economy after that stark warning of spiralling inflation from the Bank of England. So let's get the reaction then of the Business and Energy Secretary and Liz Truss supporter, Kwasi Kwarteng. A very good morning to you.
Very good morning,
Good to see you. So let's start with that Bank of England prediction that we heard yesterday. They said that households are going to suffer their biggest squeeze on income on record. The economy is going to suffer a year-long recession and inflation is going to hit 13.3% this year. Could this have been managed differently?
I think the problem we have is very simple. I think we've got inflation, which is, as you say, squeezing people's incomes. But we've also got a rising tax burden. And that's why I'm supporting Liz Truss. I've never understood why, if we're going to help people, how we're going to help people by putting up their taxes, especially when their daily shop, their costs are going up. And what's very clear to me from what the Bank of England said yesterday is that more of the same, just simply carrying on with our economic policy at the moment, is not going to cut it. It's not going to help us get out of this difficulty. And actually, the IMF only 10 days ago predicted that we would be the lowest growth G7 economy. We can't tax ourselves to growth. And everyone understands that. Everyone around the world, nobody's saying we're going to help our people by putting up taxes. Okay. But that's what we're doing in this country.
So it's interesting that you're putting the blame on Rishi Sunak's tax rises.
Yeah.
And yet the Bank of England were explicit about where the rise in inflation came from. They say it's rising energy prices. They largely blame the actions of Russia for our economic problems. So is it fair to blame Rishi Sunak?
I'm not blaming the tax rises, but put very simply, you've got a world where prices are going up. So people's people's energy bills are all going up. So that means their real incomes are being squeezed. Now, to say to people, your real incomes are being squeezed and I'm going to put your taxes up, I think it's just adding insult to injury. You're not actually dealing with the problem. And the way to deal with the problem is to have a slightly looser fiscal approach. And that's what Rishi himself implied yesterday. He said he would help people. Now, if you're going to help people and have an intervention, that is a looser approach than simply hiking up taxes to a 70-year high, which is where we are today.
OK, and I want to come on to what we do about it in the future and what could be done for the poorer people. But I do want to get to the bottom of why we've got to where we are now. I mean, what do you think of how the Bank of England has handled this? Do you feel that they should have raised interest rates earlier?
So there is an argument, and I think it's a strong one, to say that inflation was an issue that was identified at the beginning of last year. And in fact, I think people, Bank of England commentators, even people in the Treasury were saying that this was an issue. And the job of the bank was to deal with the inflation. They've got a 2% inflation target. That's actually their mandate. And now inflation is hitting double digits. So clearly something's gone wrong. And I think there is an argument to suggest that rates should have probably gone up slightly sooner.
So is the Bank of England fit for purpose?
I think, look, to say that it's not fit for purpose, I think is wrong. I think it's a good institution. I think it's worked well. But we need to look again at what the mandate is and how best they can actually fulfil that mandate.
What does that mean? Well,
that means that if your target is 2% and you're predicting 13%, something's gone wrong, and you've got to look at how the bank is organised and what the targets are.
Will it keep its independence under a Liz Truss government?
I think it's absolutely going to keep its independence. But
so how would it change? How would the mandate change?
Anna, if you have a target that's 2% and you're predicting 13%, something's gone wrong. Something's gone wrong. It's a hugely missed target. You've missed your 2% target.
And that's not because of global factors like
There were lots of global factors, but people have been talking about inflation for the last 2 years. And I think there is an issue about how the bank is operating, because clearly, if I say to you 2% is your target, and you say to me, well, actually, it's going to hit 13%, I would quite rightly say something's gone wrong. We've got to look at how you're performing.
So something has gone wrong. I mean, this is an economic crisis, isn't it?
I think it's a global crisis compounded of two things. Firstly, of course, we had the COVID pandemic. Large parts of the world, the advanced economies, were shut down. And then all of a sudden they opened and there was huge amounts of demand and the supply couldn't keep up with it. So that forced prices up. And then on top of that, you've got the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which actually had a knock-on effect on energy prices because Russia essentially is turning off its gas supply to Western Europe. So those two factors have put a lot of pressure in the system. And Rishi was right. The tax rises themselves didn't cause this. But to have tax rises in this context, I think is very odd.
OK, so an economic crisis then. So where's the Chancellor?
The Chancellor of the Exchequer is always available, and he's someone who...
We didn't hear from him yesterday. This grim warning from the Bank of England. I mean, is he on holiday?
I'm in contact with him. I've just spoken to him on WhatsApp this morning. He's completely abreast of what's going on. I'm the business secretary. I'm here. I'm in your studio. I'm in a suit. I'm not on holiday. And we're absolutely focused on trying to deal with this problem.
Where's the Prime Minister as well? I mean, some people might be saying we've had this terrible outlook for our economy. There are a lot of people who are suffering right now, not to mention in the future. We thought we might see our leaders at a time like this.
Well, I'm the business secretary. I'm here. I'm in regular contact with the Prime Minister and Chancellor. They're completely on top of what's happening.
Let's take a look then at how individuals are coping with this. We heard yesterday that the energy price cap is going to be reviewed every 3 months and every 6 months. Do you welcome that, or do you worry at all about individuals who'll now see prices rise in October and January at a time when they want to be able to keep the heating on?
I think it's a real problem, and I'm sure that a future Chancellor and the future Prime Minister, whoever he or she is, will address this very, very quickly. The reason for having 3-month reviews is that with 6-month reviews, you had very steep increases, and that was very, very damaging as well. But clearly there's an energy problem. I mean, all over Europe, they're rationing gas. They've got to reduce their gas consumption by 15%. We're not doing that in the UK, but it's an issue that has to be addressed. And Rishi himself, I thought very rightly, said we're going to have to intervene. So even he, who's saying that we've got to keep taxes high, suggests and understands that there has to be some more help to support people. OK,
well, let's talk about what Liz Truss will do to support people rather than Rishi Sunak. Last night, she was given a specific question about a woman's situation, a woman called Selina, earning just over £10,000 a year. She's not going to benefit from the scrapping, the rise in the national insurance that Liz Truss is promising, and the green energy levy, which she's going to cut, will only take £150 off her monthly bills. So she didn't seem to be able to answer this question. I mean, is enough...
I think she answered it very well.
So remind us of what is being done
said
for Selina.
Was that the big risk to this economy is a recession, a really damaging recession. And what happens in a recession is that businesses go bust, unemployment goes up, and growth craters. So that means there's a huge risk to jobs, huge risk to people being able to earn a living, and that situation is going to be disastrous for all of us. And that's why what Liz is saying is that we can't simply continue on the path that we're on. We can't simply pretend that more of the same is going to work, because it frankly isn't.
OK, so that's looking to the future, and we can argue about the rights and wrongs of that. But for people like Selina right now, there's a real need. What's the immediate help that people like her are going to get from a Liz Truss government? So
I'm not going to prejudge what a future Chancellor is going to say in a month, or what whoever the Prime Minister is.
And yet you're laying out other policies.
I can't say, because as you say, it's an immediate ask. Liz has said there's got to be an emergency budget. I think she's the only one of the candidates who said there'll be an emergency budget. And in that emergency budget, I'm sure there'll be immediate relief. And actually, the way that Liz is talking about the economy is we need immediate support now. That's why she's talking about tax cuts. That's why she's talking about allowing people to keep more of their hard-earned money. The Rishi plan was for a tax cut at the end of the next Parliament, which is 2029. That isn't going to cut it. That isn't going to help people like Selina who have faced immediate, urgent problems.
Well, you'd agree, wouldn't you, that inflation is the big problem here? I mean, the Bank of England's saying it's going to reach as high as 13% by the end of the year. And you will also know that there are a lot of economists who are very concerned about tax-cutting plans in this kind of scenario. They worry they're going to be even more inflationary and we'll end up with...
So no economist I've ever heard of says the way to deal with a recession is to put up interest rates and to squeeze what they call fiscal policy, to put up taxes. So if you're facing a recession, to face a world where interest rates are going up and then you're putting taxes up on top of that, is not helping growth. I mean, that's obvious. No economist is arguing for that.
Well, can you explain to me why the government says that matching pay to inflation is itself inflationary because it puts more money in people's pockets, why cutting taxes doesn't have the same effect because it puts more money in people's pockets?
So I have never believed that the way to deal with a recession, when you're putting up interest rates went up yesterday by the largest amount since 1995. That's 27 years ago. So on top of that, to put up taxes on people, I think is perverse. It's not a way to deal with a recession.
How do you think Liz Truss got on last night?
I think she did well.
In the programme. The audience seemed to favour Rishi.
Yeah, I think Rishi was very fluent. He was very slick. He performed at the end. I think he did make an impact. But I think what he said, which was essentially more of the same, taxes are at a 70-year high, but I'm going to put them up. I mean, he didn't say that, but that was the implication of what he said. I think is completely the wrong approach. And that's why I think it's very important that Liz wins, so that we can actually have a different approach. More of the same is not going to work.
Any lessons learned for Liz Truss's team after last night? Anything that you'd do differently next time if she was in a one-to-one interview or debate?
Well, I've always felt that it's always good to come second, because that's the impression that you leave. But that was due to a coin toss.
You mean timing-wise?
Timing-wise, yeah.
She won the coin toss.
I know, and she went first. But that was the only thing I thought. I thought she gave a very good account of herself, and she made a clear point, which I think a lot of viewers, certainly at home, recognise, is that we cannot simply carry on as before. We can't deal with a recession by putting up people's taxes to a 70-year high. That doesn't make any sense at all.
OK, Kwasi Kwarteng, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.